Welcome to Muscular Minds Podcast, where we want to build mental toughness and resilience for you, your family, your faith, and your future. Thanks for joining us today.
Today, we're going to do part 2 in our series talking about men from an intergenerational standpoint. We're really trying to pay attention and encourage men because it's very challenging for a lot of men out there. We're reading tons of things about men struggling to really find their identity, find their footing, and more than any other time. And so we're going to talk to 4 generations of men from silent boomer generation, Gen X, millennial, and then also Gen Z. And so we're going to listen to men from each one of those generations and some things that they're getting right and some challenges maybe that they've observed, whether it's with them or their generation. They're going to give us some wisdom, look at the culture around them and how that's impacted and shaped maybe some good things and stereotypes about men, and then maybe some that are not so good. And so we're going to really dig in because it's all about men showing up, stepping up, and we really want to inspire that and encourage that through all the men in our culture and generation. So let's take a deeper dive into that in part 2 of our intergenerational series of looking at men. And let's get started.
I like that. No, I think that's really wise. It hadn't even occurred to me that, yes, things I think can be hard. I recognize that buying a house is hard. Cars are. When I first started out leaving college, my wife and I, we homeowners, and we did buy 2 gently used cars, but they weren't new. And I think that would be super challenging if we were just starting off right now. I'm not even sure that that's realistic. So I can give a nod to the shift in some of the difficulty. But at the same time, being young means being full of adventure and opportunity and excitement. And it means you chase some dreams, even if they're hard. I mean, it may not look exactly the way it did, but I also think hardship creates some of the best people. You learn to be a little tougher maybe than you thought you were. I mean, we all talk about the silent generation, and Gerald, that's like right at the edge of kind of where you are. And like, they went through some incredibly challenging things. You know, they weren't necessarily saying, hey, I'm not going to do this. It's too hard. I'm going to quit. No, it's whether it was the Depression or World War II or whatever they were going through, they lean into the difficulty with the mindset that I can do this. It's going to be hard, but I'm going to do it. I can do it, but we can do it together. So I think that is something that's pretty profound. I appreciate you sharing that, Cody. That's pretty insightful. Callahan, what do you think? You're a little bit closer to that edge of that generation. What do you feel and think? Or what wisdom do you have?
Yeah, I think a lot of people in my generation almost think the opposite. They just see everything with like rose-colored glasses. You know, they just see all the movies and TikToks, whatever, that just life's going to work out, you know, the job's going to come to you, the girl's going to come to you. And like, for what I've experienced in life is, I mean, just stuff doesn't come to you. I mean, if you want a good job, you have to put yourself in organizations to get the internship. You got to apply to 12 of them if you want one of them. You have to go up and ask the girl for a number. Things just don't really come to you. And I think that's just something I've learned a lot, that if you want something in life, you have to work extremely hard for it. Obviously, you want to rely on the Lord for those things, but you do have to, there's a measure of responsibility that falls on your shoulders that I think a lot of people need to take initiative for and go out and do something.
So what you're basically saying is like, you kind of have the pendulum swung the other way to where I can do anything, far. But perhaps it's just going to happen for me. I'm not going to have to do anything. It's supposed to fall in my lap, and somebody's just going to, you know, the dream girl's going to show up on my arm, and my dream job's just going to call me up, and I'm not going to have to put in the effort. I'm not going to have to do the work. Okay. I appreciate that insight. Gerald, what would you say, sir? Kind of generationally speaking, like what encouragement would you give a young man kind of starting off? What would you say to kind of help get him rolling?
Well, I think a generation or two maybe have gotten away from us, but I think right now, if it were at all possible, young people need to start practicing the principles of decency and generosity, model the principles to others while aspiring to have the mind of Christ. And I know those are lofty principles, but if we want a better world, that's what we need to do. Young people need to be thinking in terms of rearing a generation after them that is going to be decent and generous toward others. And that includes everything. When you talk about decency, you're talking about everything from the golden rule to being respectful, having a respect for the sanctity of life, and all of those other things that fall underneath the topic of being, or the principle of being decent. And if we can all do that, we'll have a much better world.
I appreciate that, Gerald. I think decency and generosity, I think that works in any generation. The other thing I think that does is that creates a network of people that will trust you and build relationships. And I think getting ahead in anything in life is a lot about relationships. You know, can I be depended on? And so am I someone who is going to give instead of take? Am I going to be someone who can be trusted with hard things, or be responsible for others in leadership roles instead of just looking out for number one? So I think that's really good, Gerald. And I think the unique thing is, as we kind of blend our generational perspectives together, I think there's a lot of things that like I'm getting that I didn't really recognize that maybe I had lost or had gained. Now I'm just going off a little bit. I'm not where Cody is, where there's such a kind of a negative outlook, because I think I was ahead of some of those kind of struggles, and things still felt pretty achievable. You had to really work for them. But I also wasn't under the pretense that it was going to be super easy. You know, I think Callahan, as they say, it's going to fall into that 6-figure job, you know, so I just think we knew we were going to have to work really hard for it. But I don't know that you could have called us out, my generation, and said decency and generosity was something we were about. I don't think that we would have said that. As someone who was Generation X, it was really about, I'm doing my thing. I'm kind of want my autonomy here, leave me alone. So generosity means kind of trying to build a group and share. And so I don't know that was a first principle, but yeah, those are really good, guys. I like those. Let's do this. What's something that you feel like your generation got right, and what's something your generation you felt like got it wrong or is getting it wrong? Who wants to take this one on first?
For our generation, I think we all had a general understanding of what was right and what was wrong. And those terms are the differences between right and wrong have kind of gotten muddled these days. Sometimes we even, some of our heroes are not necessarily the type of people we'd want to serve as role models for our kids. I think our generation definitely knew the difference between right and wrong. Whether we have lost our way, I'm not sure, but I hope that we can regain it. One of my childhood friends, or high school friends, was Kinky Friedman. Kinky was in my homeroom, and we were in homeroom together, and we called him Richard back then. He was kind of a quiet guy, but he certainly turned out to be something else. But Kinky was a good guy. He was running for governor when I ran into him at a coffee shop in Austin, and we got to reminiscing about the old days in Austin and how our families could go away for a week and leave the house unlocked and never need to worry about anyone breaking in or stealing it. And Kinky asked me, well, how do we get back to those days? I kind of stammered and stuttered, and I don't know if I really ever gave him a good answer, but I think that's something we all need to think about. I don't know that we can ever get back to those days, but we need to get back to some point in time where we can trust each other. I hope that we can. It's maybe a lofty ideal, but I hope that we can.
Well, I like the idealism. I think it's always good, to strive for the best in something. So I like that, Gerald. I appreciate that. Cody or Callahan, who wants to go next?
Yeah, I think for my generation, something we've struggled with is what I was mentioning before, is that kind of defeatist mindset. And, I think we've blamed a lot of our struggles and a lot of the ways that life is difficult on previous generations. And I don't know that has been the healthiest, but now, as we're kind of getting into our 30s and a little bit beyond, I think a lot of folks in my generation are trying to step back from, the distractions of technology that, really developed throughout our childhood. When we were kids, we didn't have smartphones, and you may or may not have had a computer in the house, and all that kind of exploded and we grew up with it. And so now I think folks in my generation are really valuing human connection and human experience again, valuing kind of putting distractions aside and realizing, while technology is great and a really helpful tool, I think a lot of us are realizing kind of the hold and addiction that it has on us. So you see a lot of, people detoxing from social media or kind of going a little bit off the grid and doing their own like homesteading and self-sustaining type things. And so I think we're trying to get to a happy balance there to where, we have these tools and can use them, but also make sure we're not falling too deep into that we're missing human connection and that we're, missing living life.
I like that. Sounds like there's been a little bit of a revelation, generationally speaking, and maybe that's an age thing, right? But trying to balance technology and relationship. I do in my everyday job, I do hear a lot of people searching for connection with people. And a lot of times they're trying to do that through technology, and a lot of times it makes them feel maybe worse in some ways. It's kind of leaves hollow feeling because they're not maybe getting that in-person experience. And that can be hard to try to figure out how to balance the technology and the human interaction. So, but that's good. I appreciate the insight, Cody. Callahan, what about you? What wisdom do you feel like you have?
Yeah, I think our generation does a really good job of just like being bold. If there's something that our generation doesn't like, they will not be super scared to say it. They'll point it out, pretty black and white. But I also think that can be a downfall. I don't think my generation really respects the views of maybe older generations. Kind of cocky just in the way that they think we know everything. Our generation has all this knowledge because of technology and this and that. So it's kind of like our way is the only way and we don't really want to listen to other people. And I definitely like that we can do things new and change things a little bit, but I do think there needs to be a respect and a little bit of hesitation to just kind of overturning every kind of cultural thing that's come before us.
Yeah, I think that's pretty normal to be when you're the youngest generation, you push it hard. Generation X, we were considered off the rails. We were basically just diabolical and like nobody could pin us down. It was like sand through a hand, like we were just going to do whatever. It was kind of the truth is out there generation. So I just think some of that, it goes with being when you're the youngest generation. And it's the interesting thing is as the generations sat together, what that looks like, wisdom happens. And so, I'm hearing from Gerald, just wanting to get back to decency and generosity and trusting one another. And Cody, I hear him, hey man, relationships are important, and it's not just about technology, the way we maybe thought it was. Right. And then Callahan, like, hey man, we push hard, we're bold, but maybe we need to be willing to get some feedback for some other people too. So I like that. Let's see. Anything that you feel like one of the generations here, you're like, man, I really noticed this about this generation and appreciate that. Or is there something that you like, a question you would have asked from another generation? I'm just kind of throw that around for a second. I'll go first while y'all are thinking. I do notice that boldness. I like that. I think that's good. I think maybe there's been a response to maybe what's been going on before that, where you didn't really feel like you could say anything, right? Everything was kind of, for a while, you read about people getting canceled or people are afraid to share this or talk about that or really say what they think or feel or believe. And man, y'all don't play. I feel like y'all just like, I'm going to say whatever, man. I don't care about that. And so you're very direct and bold. Whatever you believe, you plant your flag, so to speak. And that's an admirable quality to have as a generation. So I don't think we could describe your generation as lukewarm for sure.
Yeah, definitely not.
Anybody else want to shout out to one of the generations represented here tonight?
Go ahead.
One of the really encouraging things I see is we have a lot of really brilliant young people coming along who are really good kids. And that gives me a lot of hope for the future, especially for their future, because they're stepping out into a world that is filled with some daunting problems, and I won't live long enough now to see how it all turns out. But I really pray that they're able to endure what lies ahead of them. But I am encouraged that we do have these really smart young people, a lot smarter than I was at their age, and I'm excited for their future.
I appreciate that, Joe. I think you're right. I mean, there's some things that, I'm just thinking about sports and people that play into their 30s and 40s professionally, and they squeeze everything they can out of their bodies as far as just with their approach to their practices and their mindsets. And I just think the younger generations are catching on sooner and faster about how to do things right. Nutrition, sleep, productivity, and awareness, just all those kind of things. There's an awareness sooner that I think maybe some of us that are older, we didn't have it in our 20s or 30s sometimes. So that's pretty impressive to see that. And a lot of times using that in a positive way, not trying to just be selfish with it, but using that to advance things that are good for other people. So that is an encouraging thing, Gerald. I appreciate you noticing that.
Well, Jared, one of the common denominators I see among those brilliant, outstanding young people is great parenting. And I think that if we have any hope for the future, it will be to raise another generation that will be great parents.
For sure. I think the next generation is always kind of an opportunity for hope. And I appreciate that. Cody, what do you got, bud? Close us out on this topic.
I think I would echo what y'all were saying about this next generation and just the boldness. I work at a university, so I work with college students a lot. And I see them, being bold in their faith, being bold in their career aspirations in a way that I think my generation was maybe a little hesitant to. And so that's encouraging to see that kind of coming back around. I also see them processing and kind of weeding out information a lot better. We're hounded with so much information day in and day out. And this is a generation that, I talked about my generation kind of grew up with the explosion of technology and information. And this next generation, it's all they've known. And so I feel like they're better at processing what information they need to listen to and take in and being able to kind of weed out the noise a little better so that it's not so overwhelming to them.
Yeah, better to filter it. Yeah, I agree. I look at some young people's devices. They have like 10 conversations and 5 chats going and 3 social media streams. And it's a little overwhelming just to see all that. But for them, it's like a quick glance. They already know what's going on the screen and then they're moving on. And they filter it just naturally. And I think that's something that those that are older, that is a challenge to do. It feels a little overwhelming to see everything happening sometimes on these kids' screens. Yeah. All right, let's go around the horn to close us out, and let's do last words. And let it start with the youngest generation and move forward. So Calvin and Gerald, we will let you close us out. Last words, 30 seconds or less.
Yeah, my last thoughts are honestly just a question for Gerald. How do you think that it affects our generation? Just like, anytime there's any kind of free time, like when you're waiting for the dentist or you get in the car, like it's playing music or turning on the TV when you get home or listening to a podcast while you're running. How do you think that like constant stream of technology affects us?
I'm overwhelmed by it. Actually, this is something that really is totally foreign to my generation. And I know Jared and I talk a lot about whether I could even handle this podcast.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I'm getting to what you're asking. What is your question?
Yeah, like what exactly did your generation, do you think, like did a lot in their free time? Like when you get home and you don't really have something to do, what exactly would your generation turn to fill the time?
It's probably turn on the TV.
Yeah.
That doesn't take any thinking at all other than turning on the switch. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
I also know his generation did a lot of, there's a lot of chores and work and after school jobs. I know my father-in-law had a paper route at like 10 years old. And so there wasn't a lot of free time to do anything. And so it's filled with a lot of responsibilities and activities that I think some of us that are younger were in a way blessed not to have to go through some of those things at the same level that maybe prior generations had on them as far as heavy burdens. All right, Cody, 30 seconds. Oh, go ahead, Gerald. You want one more?
Yeah, gave kind of a shallow answer. As for me personally, I write a lot of historical retrospectives, and so I do a great deal of research. I'm not a copy and paste person.
Yeah.
I actually research it and then put it all in my own words in a retrospective. And so that's one of the things that consumes a lot of my time.
It sounds like you like to be productive, though, with your time, and you like to do something with it.
Yeah, I'm always looking for how I can benefit somebody else.
I like that. And it goes back to that generosity you talked about.
Right.
Cody? All right.
Yeah. Along the lines of what Callahan was just asking, one of the things that I really envy from the older generations and like my grandparents' generation is just the ability to be still.
Mm-hmm.
My grandparents would just sit on the porch for hours and drink their coffee and enjoy, being outdoors. And that's something that if I were to try, I would have to really focus on slowing down and being still, which sounds weird. I have apps on my phone to disable my phone so that I don't constantly just pick it up and get distracted by something. That's something it seems weird to think of it as a skill. To that generation, it's not a skill. It's just living and enjoying life and being present. But I think for us, it's something we really have to practice that. And so that's something I envy and something that I want to work towards is just being able to put distractions aside and be in the moment and be more present.
I like that. I think one of the things that I would say is simplicity. And I'm going to go back to, I think Gerald said something too, whether it was just a mindset of the time in TV and culture, there was like a sense that you could accomplish things, you could do things. Even like this podcast, this is something that was kind of beyond me when I felt like I first started. Now we're just hopping on doing it together. And it's just this idea that you can accomplish things if you really want to go at it. It does not mean it will be easy. It's usually anything worth doing is hard, but it's just leaning into the stuff that is worth leaning into, whether that's a relationship or an opportunity, a job, whatever it is, your faith, those things that are worth spending time on. And then like learning some balance, right? Let me check myself on my technology or even my job. Am I giving what I need to those relationships and those people that need me? My generation didn't really understand self-care. I think we did it, but we didn't really understand the word that came later. But I think that's something that is pretty important to try to do. But I think that's something that I would also to share. Gerald, you got the last word. What do you got?
Oh, this is my first shot at doing a podcast, and I guess I've been more concerned about whether I stumbled and fumbled around too much and whether I was really cool or not. Last words, I'm very hopeful about the future, and I'm an optimistic person. I may have come across as being a little bit negative, but I'm really optimistic about the future because of what I can see in both technologically. I think I could see that there may be a turning point here where the church is going to have more meaning to people than it's had in the past. And perhaps that's just a function of where we go to church. But at any rate, I think there are going to be a lot of positive things happening in the future. At least I hope so.
Nice. I appreciate that, Gerald. Well, I appreciate you guys jumping on the podcast today. It's been a generational mix blend. We have basically silent/boomer generation, millennial, Gen X, and Generation Z all in the same room, same podcast, learning from each other, sharing wisdom with the world, specifically for men that are just maybe out there that could use encouragement, support, and young men that are just getting started. But also, we are happy to share the wisdom and those that have poured into us. And we clearly don't have it all figured out, but we also appreciate those that have put their energy and time into us, and we want to give that back to others. So appreciate y'all taking time to be here tonight.
Sir, thank you.
Yes, sir. And so obviously you can check on our podcast further at muscularminds.com, and we will get you next time.
Thanks for joining Muscular Minds today, where strength isn't measured by how much you lift, but who you lift up. And that starts with you.